Once upon a time, in a future not too far from our own, there lived a man named Guy Montag. Montag was a fireman, but in his world, firemen did not put out fires. Houses in this strange, metallic city were fireproof. They did not burn. So the firemen had a different job, a darker purpose. Their job was to start fires. They were the guardians of happiness, or so they were told, charged with burning the most dangerous things in existence, books. To Montag, fire was beautiful. It was a pleasure to burn, he would often think. He loved to see things eaten by the flames, to see them blackened and changed. He wore a helmet with the number 451 etched onto it, the temperature at which paper catches fire and burns. On his chest, he wore the symbol of a salamander, the legendary creature that could survive in fire. He wielded a great hose, not spewing water, but spraying toxic kerosene, coating the pages of forbidden books before flicking his lighter and watching them dance in orange and yellow heat. At the end of the day, he would return to the firehouse, wash his blackened hands, and walk home with a permanent, fierce grin on his face. He thought he was happy. He thought everything was perfect. One autumn night, the wind was blowing gently, kicking up dried leaves across the pavement. Montag was walking home from his shift. The street was silent. The city was usually filled with the roar of jet planes overhead and the buzzing of technology. But this corner felt unusually quiet. As he turned the corner near his house, he felt a presence. It wasn't a threat, but a softness. There, standing under the light of a street lamp, was a young girl. She was slender, with a face as bright and pale as milk, and eyes that seemed to hold the curiosity of the entire world. Her name was Clarice McClellan. She wasn't looking at a screen. She wasn't listening to the seashell radios that everyone else wore in their ears to drown out the silence. She was simply looking at the leaves. She was looking at him. "I'm Clarice," she said softly. "And you're the fireman, aren't you?" Montag felt strange. People didn't usually talk to each other like this. "How old are you?" he asked, trying to regain his authority. "I'm 17 and I'm crazy," she replied with a light laugh. She began to walk with him toward his house. She asked him questions that no one had ever asked him before. She asked him if he ever read the books he burned. He laughed and said that was against the law. She asked him if he knew that long ago, firemen used to put out fires instead of starting them. He laughed again, but his laughter sounded uneasy in the quiet night. Then she looked up at the sky. "There's a man in the moon," she whispered. "Have you ever looked?" Montag hadn't. He hadn't looked at the moon in years. He was too busy watching the giant parlor walls, huge televisions that covered entire walls of a room, or racing his car at terrifying speeds. As they reached her house, which was blazing with lights, real lights, not television screens, but the lights of a family sitting and talking to each other, Clarice stopped. She turned to him, her dark eyes searching his face. "Are you happy?" she asked. Before Montag could answer, she was gone, running into her house like a wisp of smoke. "Happy?" Montag muttered to himself as he unlocked his own front door. "Of course I'm happy. What does she think? I'm not happy?" But as he stepped into his own home, the smile he had worn all day fell from his face like a mask. His house was cold. It was like stepping into a mausoleum, a tomb. He walked into the bedroom where his wife, Mildred, lay. The room was pitch black. Mildred was stretched out on the bed, uncovered and cold like a body on a slab. In her ears were the seashells, the tiny thimble-sized radios buzzing with electronic ocean sounds and music and talk, pouring noise into her brain even while she slept. She was physically there, but her mind was a million miles away, lost in a sea of distraction. Montag felt a sudden wave of despair. He looked at his wife, who was a stranger to him, and then he looked out the window. He remembered Clarice's face. He realized with a terrifying jolt in his chest that he was not happy. He was not happy at all. He wore his happiness like a mask, and the girl had run off with it across the lawn, and there was no way to get it back. That night,
The silence of the room was broken by a terrifying sound. The sound of jet bombers screaming over the city, shaking the walls. The country was on the brink of war, always on the brink of war, but nobody talked about it. They just watched their parlor walls and drove their fast cars.
The next morning, Montag tried to talk to Mildred. He wanted to tell her about the girl, about the emptiness he felt, but Mildred was only interested in the family, the characters on the 3 giant TV screens in their living room. She wanted a 4th wall installed, which would cost 1/3 of Montag's yearly salary. She didn't care about the war, or the moon, or the smell of leaves. She only cared about the script the TV studio sent her, so she could pretend to be part of the show. Day after day, Montag met Clarice on his walk to work. She became the only bright spot in his gray life. She did strange things. She rubbed a dandelion under his chin to see if he was in love. "It says you're not in love with anyone," she said. Montag was angry, claiming he loved his wife, but deep down, he knew the flower was right. Clarice told him that she was afraid of children her own age. "They kill each other," she said sadly. "In this world, teenagers drove cars so fast they crashed for fun, or they shot each other in fun parks. Life was cheap. Life was fast. No one stopped to think." Clarice was the outcast because she liked to walk, to smell the rain, and to think. "You're different, Mr. Montag," she told him one afternoon. "When I talk, you look at me. When I said something about the moon, you looked at the moon. The others would never do that. You're a fireman, but somehow you don't seem like one." For a week, these walks continued. Montag began to feel his senses awakening. The world seemed sharper, more colorful. He started to taste the rain. He started to truly see. And then one day, Clarice was gone. The street was empty. The leaves blew across the pavement, but there was no girl with a milk-white face to greet him. The silence returned, but this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was wrong. At the firehouse, a dark beast slept. It was the mechanical hound, a robotic creature made of brass and copper, with 8 legs and a needle in its snout, loaded with lethal morphine. It was designed to hunt down criminals and enemies of the state. Usually, it slept, but lately, when Montag walked by, the hound would growl. Its green neon eyes would flicker. It seemed to know that Montag was changing. It seemed to smell the guilt rising in him, the secret thoughts he was beginning to harbor. Montag was terrified of the hound. He told his captain, a well-read but cynical man named Beatty. "The hound doesn't like me," Montag said. Captain Beatty smiled a slow, knowing smile. "It doesn't like or dislike," Beatty said. "It just functions. It's a trajectory. It has a target. Unless you have a guilty conscience, Montag." Montag's heart raced. Did Beatty know? Did the hound know? Because Montag did have a secret. It wasn't just the conversations with Clarice. It was something else. Behind the ventilator grill in the hallway of his cold, empty house, Montag had hidden something. During the last few fires, when no one was looking, his hands had acted on their own. They had reached out and stolen something before it could burn. Books. He didn't know what was in them. He hadn't read them yet, but he had them. And now that Clarice was gone and the hound was growling, Montag felt the weight of those books pressing down on him. The world was about to catch fire, but this time it wouldn't be the house of a stranger. It would be his own life. The change in Guy Montag was no longer just a whisper. It was a scream trapped in his throat. The alarm at the firehouse rang, a harsh, jarring bell that signaled it was time to destroy. Montag slid down the brass pole, his heart pounding, not with excitement, but with dread. The engine roared to life, the salamander truck racing through the night streets, carrying the firemen to their next target. They arrived at an old 3-story house. It was rumored to be full of books. Usually, the police would have already arrived to haul the book owners away to an asylum, leaving the house empty for the firemen. But tonight, something was different. When Montag and the other firemen kicked open the door, the owner was still there. She was an older woman, standing amidst a mountain of books that spilled from the shelves like a waterfall of paper. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She stood with a quiet, terrifying dignity. "Play the man, Master Ridley," the woman said, quoting a history long forgotten. "We shall this day light such a candle, by God's grace, in England, as I trust shall never be put out." Beatty, the captain, struck her across the face. "Enough talk," he shouted. "Where are the hidden ones?" The firemen began to smash the place with their axes. Books flew into the air like frightened birds, their pages fluttering helplessly. In the chaos, a book fell into Montag's hands. It was heavy, bound in leather. Without thinking, as if his hand had a brain of its own, Montag shoved the book inside his coat, pressing it against his chest. He could feel its heart beating against his own. They pumped the kerosene over the piles of books. They soaked the floors. They drenched the walls. The fumes made Montag dizzy. "Come on, woman," Beatty yelled. "The house is soaked. Get out!" But the woman refused to move. She held a single kitchen match in her hand. Beatty backed away, counting down. 3, 2. "You can't have my books," she seemed to say with her eyes. Before Beatty could ignite his lighter, the woman struck her match against the railing. Whoosh! The house erupted in a ball of flame. The woman, the books, and the history they held were consumed in an instant. Montag stumbled back, the heat searing his face, tears streaming down his cheeks, not from the smoke, but from the sheer horror of it. She had chosen to burn rather than live in a world without her books. The ride back to the firehouse was silent. Montag could not look at Beatty. He could only feel the book hidden under his coat, burning him like a block of hot ice. When he got home, he hid the book under his pillow. He climbed into bed, shivering uncontrollably. He felt sick, a deep physical sickness that settled in his bones. "Mildred," he whispered to his wife in the dark, "I can't go to work today. I feel terrible." Mildred, busy with her toaster and her seashell radios, was annoyed. "You were fine last night," she said. "We burned an old woman," Montag said, his voice shaking. "She shouldn't have had books," Mildred replied instantly, without looking at him. "It's against the law." "But why?" Montag asked. "Why did she stay? There must be something in those books, something we don't imagine to make a woman stay in a burning house. You don't stay for nothing." Mildred didn't care. She only cared that he might lose his job, which would mean losing the parlor walls and the family. Then, almost casually, she dropped a bombshell. "Oh, by the way," she said, staring at the TV screen, "the McClellan girl, I think she's dead. A car hit her about 4 days ago. I forgot to tell you." Montag felt like he had been punched. Clarice? Dead? The girl who loved the moon and the rain? Forgotten like a piece of trash? The cruelty of his wife, the cruelty of this world threatened to crush him. Suddenly, a heavy vehicle pulled up outside. The front door buzzer sounded. It was Captain Beatty. Beatty walked into the bedroom, moving slowly, leaning on his cane. He knew Montag wasn't really sick. He knew Montag was wrestling with the poison of curiosity. Beatty sat in a chair, lit a pipe, and began to speak. It was a lecture, a history lesson delivered with a chilling calm. "You ask how this started, Montag?" Beatty said, smoke curling around his head. "It wasn't the government. It wasn't a decree. It was the people." Beatty explained how the world got faster. Books were cut shorter. Movies became 2 minutes long. Everything was condensed into a headline, a snapshot. Snap, click, pop. People lost the patience to read. They wanted to be happy, and books were confusing. Books had conflicting ideas. Books offended people. Dog lovers didn't like books about cats. Doctors didn't like books critical of medicine. So to make everyone happy, to make everyone equal, they decided to burn the books. "We are the happiness boys, Montag," Beatty smiled, showing his teeth. "We stand against the small tide of those who want to make everyone unhappy with conflicting theories and thoughts. We burn them. We burn them all." Then Beatty leaned in close. "Every fireman gets an itch. He wants to know what the books say. Well, Montag, take my word for it. They say nothing. They are dust. But if a fireman accidentally takes a book home, we let him keep it for 24 hours. If he doesn't burn it by then, we come and burn it for him."
Beatty stood up and left. The threat hung in the air like poisonous gas. Montag watched the car drive away through the window. He turned to Mildred. She was pacing, worried about the captain's visit. "We have to do something," Montag said. His hands were shaking. He walked to the hallway. He reached up to the ventilation grill near the ceiling. "What are you doing?" Mildred shrieked. Montag pulled the grill open. He reached inside and pulled out a book, then another and another. He threw them onto the floor. Mildred shrieked. She backed away, her eyes wide with terror. "He'll come back! He'll burn the house! You'll ruin us!" "We're already ruined," Montag shouted. He grabbed a book, a small red one. "We have to look, Millie. We have to see what's in them. Maybe they can stop us from making the same mistakes. Maybe they can tell us why that woman died." He sat on the floor, surrounded by the forbidden pile. He opened the book. The pages were yellow and old. "Read," he commanded his wife. "We're going to read." Mildred was sobbing, rocking back and forth. Outside, the sky was gray and heavy with the threat of war. But inside, Montag began to read the first line of a book, his voice stumbling over the unfamiliar words. "It is computed that 11,000 persons have several times suffered death rather than submit to break their eggs at the smaller end." He didn't understand it yet, but as he read, a scratching sound came from the front door. A slow, heavy scratch. Mildred froze. "It's the captain or the hound," she whispered. Montag didn't move. "Let them wait," he said. "Let them wait."
The scratching at the door stopped, but the fear did not leave the room. Montag and Mildred sat amidst the scattered books. Montag tried to read, but the words danced before his eyes. He read a page, then read it again, but the meaning slipped through his mind like sand through a sieve. "I don't understand," Mildred whined, kicking a book with her toe. "This means nothing. The people on the parlor walls, they are my family. They're real. This is just paper." Montag felt a desperate frustration rising in his chest. He remembered a childhood memory, trying to fill a sieve with sand on a beach because a cruel cousin had promised him a dime if he did. The faster he poured the sand, the faster it fell through. That was his mind now. He needed someone to help him keep the sand. He needed a teacher. He remembered an old man he had met in a park a year ago, a retired English professor named Faber. The man had hidden something quickly in his coat when Montag approached, but Montag hadn't arrested him. They had spoken for an hour about poetry and the way the world used to be. "I have to go see him," Montag decided. He took the Bible, one of the last copies in existence perhaps, and hid it under his coat. He left Mildred with her family on the walls and stepped out into the city. He took the subway. The train was a nightmare. Loud, blaring advertisements for Denham's dentifrice screamed from the speakers. "Denham's, Denham's dentifrice." Montag tried to memorize a verse from the Bible, to hold on to something real, but the noise was overwhelming. He stood up and shouted at the speakers, terrifying the other passengers, before sprinting out at his stop. He arrived at Faber's small, dusty apartment. The old man was terrified at first, seeing a fireman at his door. But when he saw the Bible in Montag's hand, his fear turned to awe. He touched the pages with trembling fingers. "It's been a long time," Faber whispered. "I'm not a brave man, Montag. I saw the way things were going years ago. I said nothing. I am one of the guilty ones." "Teach me," Montag pleaded. "I feel like I'm falling. I need to know what's in these books. Is it the books that I need?" Faber shook his head gently. "No, Montag. It's not the books you need. It's some of the things that were once in books. Books were just a type of receptacle where we stored a lot of things we were afraid we might forget. The magic is only in what books say, how they stitch the patches of the universe together into one garment for us." Faber explained that society needed 3 things: quality of information, truthful, detailed texture of life, not the smooth wax face of TV, leisure to digest it, time to think, not just to be bombarded by noise, and the right to carry out actions based on what we learn. Freedom. We have none of these, Montag realized. So let's change it. Let's destroy the firemen. Montag proposed a daring, reckless plan. They would print extra copies of books and hide them in the houses of the firemen themselves. Then they would call in the alarms. The firemen would arrive to burn their own colleagues' houses. The symbol of authority would eat itself. Faber was hesitant. He was old and afraid. "It's too dangerous," he said. "The culture is dead, let it die." But Montag wouldn't take no for an answer. He began to tear the pages out of the precious Bible, one by one. "Stop it," Faber cried out. "I'll tear it all up unless you help me," Montag threatened. Faber relented. He agreed to help. He went to his bedroom and brought out a small green metal object, no larger than a .22 bullet. "I'm a coward, Montag. I don't leave my house, but I made this. It's a two-way radio. It fits in your ear. I can hear what you hear. I can talk to you. I will be the queen bee, sitting safely in the hive. You will be the drone, traveling into the danger." Montag placed the device in his ear. He could hear Faber's breathing. He wasn't alone anymore. Armed with this device and a head full of new dangerous ideas, Montag returned home, but he found a horrifying scene. Mildred had friends over, Mrs. Bowles and Mrs. Pelps. They were sitting in the parlor, surrounded by the roaring screens, drinking martinis and talking about nothing. They talked about the war as if it were a game. "If my husband dies, I'll just buy a new one," Mrs. Pelps said. They talked about children as if they were laundry. "I plunked them in school 9 days out of 10. When they're home, I heave them into the parlor and turn the switch. It's like washing clothes." Montag felt a red rage boiling over. He couldn't stand their emptiness. He couldn't stand their cruelty. "Turn it off," he shouted, snapping the wall switch. The room went silent. The women stared at him in shock. "I want to read you something," Montag said, ignoring Faber's panicked voice in his ear, warning him to stop. "Montag, you fool! Don't blow your cover," Faber hissed. But Montag grabbed a book of poetry. He opened it to a poem called Dover Beach. He began to read. His voice was rough, but the words were powerful. He read about a world that had no joy, no love, no light, no certitude, no peace, no help for pain. When he finished, the room was deathly quiet. Then, Mrs. Phelps began to cry. She sobbed uncontrollably. She didn't know why. The sheer emotion of the words had cracked her shell. "You're nasty," Mrs. Bowles yelled at Montag. "Poetry makes people sad. Why would you do that?" The women stormed out of the house, cursing him. Mildred ran to the bathroom to take more sleeping pills. Montag stood alone in the silent living room. He had made a mistake. He had shown his hand. Faber's voice whispered in his ear, tired and worried. "You've done it now, Montag. You'd better head to the firehouse. Act normal. We have to play the game until we can strike." Montag walked to the firehouse that night with heavy steps. His legs felt numb. When he entered, the mechanical hound was gone. That was a bad sign. Captain Beatty was waiting. He was playing cards with the other men. He looked up as Montag entered, his eyes twinkling with malice. "Well, well," Beatty said softly. "Here comes a very strange beast, which in all tongues is called a fool." Beatty held out his hand. He wanted the book. Montag handed over a book, not the Bible, but another one he had brought to sacrifice. Beatty tossed it into the trash can without looking at it. "Sit down, Montag. Let's play a hand of poker." As they played, Beatty began to quote literature. He quoted authors, philosophers, and poets, twisting their words to confuse Montag, to make books seem ridiculous and contradictory. It was a verbal beating. Montag felt dizzy. He couldn't answer. Beatty was using the very weapon Montag loved, books, to destroy him. Suddenly, the station bell rang. The alarm. "A special case," Beatty said, standing up. He checked the address on the ticker tape. A strange smile spread across his face. "A very special case indeed. Come on, Montag. You'll want to see this one." They jumped into the salamander. They roared through the streets. Montag sat in the back, feeling like he was in a dream. The truck turned a corner, then another, and then it stopped. Montag looked up, his breath caught in his throat. They weren't in a stranger's neighborhood. They were parked in front of his own house. Mildred was walking out the front door, carrying a suitcase, her face blank. She got into a taxi and didn't even look back. "She turned you in," Beatty said, stepping off the truck. He looked at Montag with a look of supreme triumph. "Your wife and her friends, they turned you in." Beatty pointed his finger at Montag's front door. "Now, Montag," the captain said, "you wanted to fly near the sun, and now you've burnt your wings. You know the law. This is your mess. You are going to burn it." Beatty handed Montag the flamethrower. "Burn it all," Beatty commanded. Montag stood on his front lawn, the heavy flamethrower in his hands. It felt like a serpent, cold and deadly. His house, the place where he had slept, where he had tried to talk to his wife, where he had hidden his secrets, loomed before him. It was just a shell now. Mildred was gone. Clarice was gone. The family on the walls was silent. "I want you to do this job alone, Montag," Captain Beatty said, standing back with his arms crossed, watching like a ringmaster at a circus. "Start with the bedroom. Wash it away." Montag pulled the trigger. A great tongue of fire leaped from the nozzle. The heat struck him, fierce and purifying. He aimed it at the bedroom windows. The glass shattered. The fire roared inside, consuming the bed, the empty makeup bottles, the walls that had separated him from his wife. It was strangely satisfying. He was burning his past. He was burning his sadness. "That's it," Beatty shouted, over the roar of the flames. "Now the parlor. Destroy those screens." Montag turned the fire on the living room. The giant television walls exploded in sparks and colored glass. The vacuum tubes popped with a high-pitched scream. The family died a fiery death. When it was over, the house was a blackened skeleton against the night sky. Montag stood panting, the flamethrower hanging loose in his grip. "You are under arrest, of course," Beatty said casually. He stepped forward and struck Montag on the head. The blow knocked Montag's helmet off. It also dislodged the tiny green earpiece, the radio that connected him to Faber. The device fell onto the grass. Beatty picked it up and smiled. He listened for a moment to Faber's terrified voice on the other end. "Well, well," Beatty sneered. "A little friend? I suspected as much. You didn't think you were smart enough to do this alone, did you? We'll trace this back. We'll find your friend and we'll burn him too." That was the breaking point. Montag could accept his own death, but he could not let them take Faber. The old man was the only hope left. Montag's grip tightened on the flamethrower. He turned the nozzle toward Beatty. "We never burned right," Montag said, his voice low. Beatty looked at the weapon, then at Montag's eyes. He didn't back down. He didn't draw his gun. Instead, he smiled. A mocking, twisted smile. "Go ahead," Beatty challenged him. "Pull the trigger. Hand it over, guy." Montag squeezed the trigger. A blast of liquid fire engulfed the captain. Beatty spun at the blazing torch. He didn't scream. He fell to the pavement, a charred, twisting heap. The man who had burned so many books became ashes himself. The other two firemen were paralyzed with shock. Montag knocked them out with a blow to their heads, but he wasn't safe yet. From the shadows of the street, a low growl emerged, the mechanical hound. It leaped, a blur of metal and green light. Montag fired the flamethrower again. The fire hit the beast midair, exploding it into a shower of metal parts. But before it died, the hound's needle stabbed into Montag's leg. Pain, agonizing, blinding pain shot up his leg. It felt like it had been filled with cement. He collapsed. "Get up," he screamed at himself. Sirens were wailing in the distance. More salamanders were coming. The police were coming. He dragged himself up. His leg was numb, dragging behind him like a dead weight. He hobbled into the alleyway. He found 4 books that Mildred had missed in the garden bushes. He grabbed them. He began to run. Or rather, he began to limp run, fighting the numbness. He had to get to Faber's house. He had to warn him. As he moved through the dark streets, he heard a sound that chilled his blood. A voice booming from the sky. It was the police helicopters, and worse, the city alert system. "Citizens," the voice announced from every house, every streetlight. "Look out your windows. A fugitive is on the run. Guy Montag. Watch for a man running alone." Suddenly, every light in every house snapped on. The city, usually dark, became as bright as day. Thousands of doors opened. Thousands of people looked out. Montag was a rat in a trap. He dove into the shadows. He crossed a terrifyingly wide boulevard, nearly getting flattened by a car full of teenagers trying to run him over for sport. He reached Faber's house, gasping for air.
Faber was pale and shaking, but alive. Montag gave him some money. "Take the bus to St. Louis," Montag told him. "Get out of here. I'm going to the river. If I can cross the river, maybe I can lose them." They turned on Faber's small TV. The news was broadcasting the chase live. "They've brought in another mechanical hound," the announcer said excitedly. "It is being flown in from the next district. It never fails." Montag watched the screen. The new hound was sleeker, faster. Its nose tracked the scent of Montag's perspiration. "I have to go," Montag said. He told Faber to burn everything he had touched, to wipe down the doorknobs with alcohol, to turn on the sprinklers to kill his scent. Montag ran again. He ran toward the edge of the city. The hound was closing in. The helicopters were circling like vultures. He could hear the mechanical beast baying in the distance. He reached the river. It was wide and black. He stripped off his clothes, bathed in the water to wash away his scent, and dressed in Faber's old, dirty clothes he had brought with him. He waded into the water. He let the current take him. He floated away from the city, away from the lights, away from the noise. He drifted into the darkness of the countryside. For the first time in his life, there was silence. Not the empty silence of the parlor walls, but the breathing silence of nature. He floated for hours, watching the stars. He thought about fire. He realized that the sun burned time and he burned things. If both he and the sun burned, eventually everything would be destroyed. Someone had to stop burning. Someone had to start saving. His foot touched land. He dragged himself onto the muddy bank. He was exhausted, hungry, and alone. But as he walked into the woods, he saw a strange light in the distance. It wasn't the harsh light of the city. It was a warm, flickering glow. It was a campfire, and around the fire, sitting on logs, warming their hands, were men. They weren't police. They weren't firemen. They looked like tramps, but their faces were calm and intelligent. Montag stepped into the light. "Welcome, Montag," one of the men said. He held out a cup of coffee. "We've been expecting you. We saw the chase on a portable TV." The man's name was Granger. He handed Montag a small bottle of colorless liquid. "Drink this. It will change the chemical index of your perspiration. The hound won't find you now." Montag drank it. It tasted bitter. "Look," Granger pointed to the portable TV. On the screen, the hound had reached the river, but lost the scent. The police, not wanting to lose their audience, had the hound turn toward a random innocent man walking on the street. "Watch," Granger said sadly. The hound pounced. The innocent man screamed. The announcer shouted, "Montag is dead! The criminal has been punished!" The chase was over. The lie was complete. The city went back to sleep, but Montag was alive. He was standing in the woods with strangers. "Who are you?" Montag asked them. "I," said Granger, "am Plato's Republic. This man here is Marcus Aurelius. Over there is Charles Darwin, and that fellow is the Book of Ecclesiastes." Montag looked at them confused. "We don't keep books," Granger explained. "It's too dangerous to carry them, so we become them. Each of us has memorized the book. We keep it in our heads, word for word. We are the dusty covers. We are the libraries. We wait for the war to end, for the world to be ready to learn again. Then we will recite what we know." Montag felt a surge of hope. He wasn't alone. He wasn't just a failed fireman. He had a purpose. "I have a little of the Book of Ecclesiastes," Montag said shyly. "Good. Hold on to it. We'll need it." They sat by the fire. The fire warmed them. It didn't burn them. For the first time, Montag saw fire as something that gave, not something that took. But as dawn approached, a low rumble began to shake the ground. The war that had been threatened for so long was finally here. The jet planes were screaming high above the city they had just left.
The morning sun was just beginning to rise, painting the sky in faint strokes of pink and gray. Montag stood with Granger and the other book people near the riverbank. They were warming a pan of bacon over a small fire. The air was crisp and clean, smelling of earth and leaves, a smell so different from the kerosene and burnt chemicals of the city. "Eat up," Granger said quietly. "We have a long walk ahead of us. We'll move south, away from the targets." But they never got the chance to move. High above in the stratosphere, invisible to the naked eye, the war began and ended in a single heartbeat. The jet bombers, which had been circling like sharks for weeks, finally received their orders. They shrieked across the sky, tearing the clouds apart. Montag looked up. He looked toward the city he had fled just hours ago, the city where he had lived his entire life, the city where Mildred was. "Millie," he whispered. He imagined her in her hotel room. She would be staring at the parlor walls, talking to her family. She wouldn't hear the jets. She would be too busy listening to the seashell in her ear. In the distance, the city did not explode. It simply detached. It seemed to jump into the air, held there for a split second by a terrible, bright silence. Then it turned over. It fell upon itself. A blinding flash of white light erased the buildings, the streets, the parlor walls, and the firehouse. The shockwave hit the men in the woods seconds later. It was like a giant hand slamming them into the ground. Dirt, leaves, and branches rained down upon them. Montag lay face down in the dirt, gasping for air. In that moment of destruction, a memory flooded back to him, a memory he had tried so hard to find. "Chicago," he said into the dirt. "I remember now. We met in Chicago a long time ago." He saw Mildred in his mind one last time. He saw the wall screens go black as the power cut. He saw her face reflected in the blank screen, a terrified, lonely face. Just a fraction of a second before the fire took her, he felt a deep, aching pity. Not love, perhaps, but a sorrow for a life that had been empty until the very end. The roar of the explosion faded. The wind died down. The dust began to settle. Slowly, painfully, the men stood up. They brushed the dirt from their clothes. They looked toward the horizon. The city was gone. It was just a flat heap of gray ash and rubble, glowing faintly red. Granger looked at the fire they had cooked breakfast on. He looked at the pile of ashes in the distance. There was a silly bird called the phoenix. Back before Christ, every few hundred years he built a pyre and burnt himself up. He must have been first cousin to man. But every time he burnt himself, he sprang out of the ashes. He got himself born all over again. Granger said softly, staring into the flames. "And it looks like we're doing the same thing, over and over. But we've got one thing the Phoenix never had. We know the damn silly thing we just did. We know all the damn silly things we've done for 1,000 years. And as long as we know that and always have it around where we can see it, maybe someday we'll stop lighting our own funeral pyres."
Granger turned to the group. He kicked dust over the small campfire, putting it out. "Come on," he said. "We're going back." Montag was surprised. "Back? But there's nothing there." "There are survivors," Granger said. "People who are hurt, people who are confused. They will need us. They will need to know how to rebuild. Not just buildings, but how to think. We're going to build a mirror factory first and put out nothing but mirrors for the next year and take a long look in them." The group of men turned their backs on the safety of the woods and began to walk toward the destroyed city. They walked in silence, each man carrying a book in his head, a treasure chest of wisdom to share with a broken world. Montag walked at the front. He felt the rhythm of his feet on the ground. He felt the new sun warming his back. The city was dead, but he was alive. Clarice was gone. Faber was gone. Mildred was gone, but the words were still there. He listened to his own mind. He searched for something to say when they reached the city, something to offer the survivors. A verse from the Bible he had memorized from the book of Ecclesiastes floated to the surface of his thoughts. To everything there is a season, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to keep silence and a time to speak. Yes, that was it. And there was something else from the book of Revelation, a promise of a future where life would grow again from the ashes. And on either side of the river was there a tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Montag repeated the words in his heart, for the healing of the nations. He took a deep breath of the morning air. The road was long, and the work would be hard. But for the first time, Guy Montag wasn't just a fireman. He wasn't a burner. He was a keeper. He was a builder. And as they walked down the road, the sun rose higher, burning away the shadows, lighting the way for the men who carried the memory of the world.